Some creatures have a very special story. They were driven out by humans through monocultures, mining, or manufacturing. But in some places, nature is reclaiming its own. These are stories of change and of hope. One of North America's great natural wonders, the Niagara Falls attract visitors from all over the world. Far less attention is paid to the lake from which they flow, Lake Erie. It's one of the 5 Great Lakes on the northern edge of the United States. It used to be surrounded by forests and swamps. Then humans arrived, and with them agriculture, urban development, and industry. Unspoiled nature turned into one of the most highly polluted regions of North America. Today, more and more people are working to bring nature back to the shores of Lake Erie. And indeed, more and more animal and plant species which had been wiped out here are returning. The wounds inflicted on Lake Erie by man are beginning to heal. You can still find them on the shores of Lake Erie, green oases where nature is still as it was before the arrival of the first white settlers. Lush wetland areas, remnants of what's called the Great Black Swamp on the southwest side of the lake. Paradise for birds, for cormorants and herons that find food and shelter here all year round. And for countless migratory birds, which rest and feed here every year on their flight to and from the far north, like the magnolia warblers. Biologist Kim Kaufman is fighting to preserve these oases on Lake Erie. She watches the cedar waxwing here in May and September. And she often hears the call of the northern cardinal.
Coming out in the morning into a marsh and watching the marsh come alive around you, hearing the birds start to wake up and sing. And on some mornings, you can literally see birds dropping in out of the sky after they've done these amazing journeys. So you've got this agricultural desert and then these little oases of green on the lakeshore that are a beacon for migratory birds and vital to the survival of entire populations of some migratory songbirds.
Many different types of New World warblers stop off here every year, like the yellow warbler and the mourning warbler. It's just over 50 years that this small, valuable ecosystem has been under official protection. Bullfrogs and the eastern garter snake are also at home here. Today, Kim and her colleagues from the Bird Observatory are focusing on the migratory birds. Taking great care not to harm them, they catch some of the transient visitors.
Do you want to carry it, or?
Sure.
It's up to you.
In time, the captured birds will tell the ornithologists how nature is faring around Lake Erie. The researchers are monitoring how many birds stop over here and what condition they're in.
These birds are 850. Yeah, you want to record for Katie?
They examine the birds in the field station.
3859731.
Measure their wingspan and body size.
That was yesterday's bird.
One fat.
And they weigh the delicate visitors.
36.10.
How well fed they are is shown beneath the breast feathers.
These migratory birds will feast on insects and pad their bodies with fat. That's how they fuel these journeys. So we're even measuring the amount of fat that these birds have. And that can be really important information if you're looking at the quality of the habitat, especially as we're trying to go backwards and restore habitat that we've altered. We want to make sure that it's not just a green space, but it's the kind of quality habitat that birds really need and wildlife needs.
If a bird is caught for the first time, it's ringed before being released. Maybe they'll see it again next year. Green oases like these are rare on Lake Erie. Over the centuries, man has drained most of the wetlands, cleared the forests, and developed and settled the shores of the lake. The south side, in the US states of Michigan and Ohio, is intensively farmed. The same as in the Canadian province of Ontario in the north. Lake Erie is the southernmost of the 5 Great Lakes, on the border between the US and Canada. And the one that suffered the most. Fertilizers and pesticides flow into it, as well as wastewater from the industrial centers of Buffalo, Cleveland, and Detroit. Detroit, lying about 20 kilometers upriver from Lake Erie on the Detroit River, has a particularly dirty history. For a long time, this was the industrial heart of the US. Chemical plants, iron and steel works, and above all, the automobile industry were the embodiment of American strength. The Big Three, General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler, and their factories, became symbols of America's prosperity.
Electromotive, with the revolutionary power for the wheels of steel that put new life in the old iron horse.
Today, Detroit and its surrounding area are among the country's most polluted regions. Not least because the golden industrial age was followed by an unparalleled collapse. In the last 50 years, countless factories and works have had to close. What remain are deprived neighborhoods, contaminated sites, and toxic waste. Detroit is part of what's disparagingly called America's Rust Belt. And many of the inhabitants feel themselves abandoned and without hope. But there are places in the city where a change has begun, where people want to bring nature and new life into the rundown districts. Here in Chandler Park, near the Detroit River, volunteers are planting trees today.
I'm so excited to be here with you guys this morning and that you guys are here with us to support Chandler Park, that it would lead to a much larger project. Where does Southeast Michigan get its drinking water from? Detroit River! So, that's why these projects are so important. Here's the marshland. It's green stormwater infrastructure. It's going to manage over 2.5 million gallons of water. That helps keep our drinking water clean. Think about that when you're planting a tree today. You're doing something fun. It's a beautiful tree, clean air, but it's also managing stormwater.
Don't take your shovels yet. Hey, if you're coming with me, hang on.
The volunteers have come from all over the city. They're helping to lay out a park with green spaces, trees, and a pond. The pond is to serve as a retention basin for rainwater. This is to stop heavy rains flooding the wastewater treatment plants and washing untreated sewage into the river and Lake Erie. Private foundations and the US government are funding the project. The local inhabitants were involved in the planning and will benefit from the green oasis.
It's going to be like a water feature. And
Yes.
so those like
Amazing.
those piles of rocks are actually for our turtle habitat. The turtles are
Wow.
going to be in there, and then
Now I'm gonna love to bring the grandbabies by now.
there'll be turtles. The wood,
Wow.
the trees right there are for amphibians.
Wow.
So it's gonna be a real nature space.
It's a change, because this was Chandler Park.
Chandler Park.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Now it done turned into, it's turning into something beautiful.
Thank you, God. Because that was trouble. You know, the police wouldn't even go in there.
Wow.
But it's gotten a lot better. It's a lot quieter now. I can sit on my porch at night without worrying about gunshots going off.
This whole development.
So this is going to improve our neighborhoods immensely.
Yeah.
Immensely. The kids have a place where they can come and learn about nature.
Say.
They can actually learn about science here
Yeah.
in their neighborhoods. This is the gift.
Projects like this are bringing nature into the industrial city and bringing people together.
Okay, I got a timer on. Here we are. All right, we're done.
This is the new face of Chandler Park.
It's just one of many projects in Detroit and around the lake. And the comeback of nature here is creating new jobs. Non-profit organizations working with the city authorities are training jobless people to become tree artisans and landscape technicians.
Then I worked for the city for 23 years and retired from Detroit City, and now I'm learning how to be a tree artisan. I want to learn how to help the environment, help the greening of Detroit. Exactly. I have children, and for the future, man, you hear about global warming and how we tearing down the planet. I want to help bring it back together and help preserve it.
The Detroit River also needs help. Industry has polluted it for decades with heavy metals and carcinogens. Today, functioning factories and blast furnaces stand next to abandoned industrial plants. One of the people fighting to eradicate the sins of the past is Bob Burns. He's Detroit's riverkeeper.
Well, we're here in Trenton right now in the lower Detroit River, and we're heading upriver to the old Trenton McLeod steel plant to take a look at the demolition work that's going on to tear down the old steel mill.
Bob works for the action group Friends of the Detroit River. Several times a week they patrol the river and watch the progress taking place, as here, where the contaminated site of this former steel plant is finally being cleaned up. But the work is fraught with hazards. Toxic substances and the debris mustn't end up in the river, especially since Detroit draws its drinking water from here. Nowadays, the wastewater of factories still operating is subject to strict regulations. Bob records occasional violations and reports them to the authorities.
That water turns to a rusty red oxidation. It goes through a system here to filter that out, and then it discharges right there. So we monitor that to make sure it's not coming out red. We keep an eye on the local industries. If we see something that's out of the normal, we'll contact them and see if they'll take care of it. Considering the historical legacy problems we had from the last century to things have really improved in the Detroit River.
It's nothing less than a change of heart. In the past, steel and coal epitomized progress. People were proud of the economic strength of their region. In Cleveland, too, the city directly on Lake Erie. But in the 1950s, even the locals could no longer ignore the price of the boom years. The pollution got worse and worse. By the end of the 1960s, the city's river, the Cuyahoga River, was so contaminated with oil and waste that it repeatedly caught fire. A burning river. This picture became a symbol throughout the country. Something here had gone very wrong. The time was ripe for a rethink. On the 22nd of April 1970, 20 million Americans took to the streets. They proclaimed the first Earth Day, calling for a healthy environment and the protection of nature. What began 50 years ago as a protest is now bearing fruit. Cleveland, the one-time industrial monster, is on the right path. People enjoying the waters of the lake where bathing was once banned. Industry must now thoroughly purify its wastewater before it gets into the river. People are fishing again in what was an open sewer. With the water so much cleaner, nature has a chance again. At the heart of the industrial area, the city is creating new biotopes on the Cuyahoga River.
Right on the edge here, as long as the bottom of the pillow is...
The Nature Conservation Authority, Cleveland Metro Parks, is reintroducing indigenous animal and plant species along the river, which had been wiped out by the pollution. An industrial wasteland with concrete riverbanks has turned into a flourishing ecosystem in the midst of the city. Perch and bass are once again spawning in the newly renatured bank areas. Upriver, nature has been brought back to the Cuyahoga, the once burning river, even more impressively. Between the industrial cities of Cleveland and Akron is now one of the newest national parks in the US, the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. The area was only granted this distinguished title in the year 2000. Unlike other national parks, like Yosemite or Yellowstone, it's not unspoiled nature that's celebrated here. It's the comeback that nature's made. The North American beaver, for instance, had at one time been wiped out in the whole state of Ohio. Now it's found a perfect home here. In the southern part of the area, biologist John Seepeck is regularly out and about with his colleagues. He's hoping that a new chapter is being written here in the success story of nature in the park. On the rail track, which used to carry coal along the river, the two are looking for different tracks. They want to find out if another new inhabitant has moved in. A trail from the river to the rails offers fresh traces.
Oh, they got tracks. Here's tracks. So you can see where the mud on the side.
Short little narrow spot in between the wetland and the river.
It's a likely raccoon, but this is a great spot for, beaver and otter. So this would be a likely corridor. This would be,
The two don't rely solely on the paw prints. They've set up camera traps throughout the park, which are automatically triggered when something moves in front of the lens. The pictures reveal who's been here recently. The North American river otter.
We'll see what's on there. Yeah. So it definitely kind of coming in. Yep. What I'm hoping in this area is to really improve our awareness about when we see otter. Are they just moving through? Are they using the fish in in some of these wetlands or these ponds, and then they move on? Are they here more than we think? Are they breeding? So it's important to understand how we improve quality habitat for certain species as well.
It's not just the river otter that's settled here again. The great blue heron also feels at home. And the osprey is once more nesting in the region. What's special about this national park is that it's not one solitary stretch of land that's protected. It's many areas long exploited by man which are growing together into one large wildlife sanctuary. More and more formerly agricultural and industrial sites are gradually being added, like this disused quarry. And this precious wetland, which used to be a desolate scrapyard. Two major highways cut through the park. They were too important to demolish, so they're staying. And they also bring in visitors. The Cuyahoga Valley National Park is one of the most visited national parks in the US. Over 2 million people come here every year to go hiking, cycling, kayaking, and even skiing, something the conservationists welcome.
It's important, to protect nature, what we have, but it's also important to get people outside to understand. You can't love what you don't know. And if the recreation is the hook to go skiing or to go biking on the towpath, then you can have messages that talk about the importance of this beauty, this nature, this surrounding habitat around you. So it's a compromise.
The wild animals have obviously adjusted to the humans. Their stocks are steadily increasing. Otters and bald eagles find ample food for their young. Coyotes are prolific breeders. Even bears and bobcats have been sighted in the area.
Deer were extirpated in the state of Ohio. Turkey, eagle, beaver, these species were gone. We cut down 90% of the forest and weren't aware that this, this isn't an abundant resource that you can just do what you want. We have to care for it. And as over time, as we became, we've become conscious of this, these species have recovered. So I think that's just a really amazing story that people don't realize.
But the wild animals don't stay within the confines of the national park. And that can lead to problems. The wilderness is already encroaching on the suburbs of Cleveland. Wildlife ecologist John Seepeck also covers this area for Cleveland Metro Parks. He's responsible for a total of 18 parks. Today, he's been rung by the new park manager, Amanda Kreck, in the West Creek Reservation. Walkers have reported meeting a predator.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you again, too. So it sounds like we have some reports of some coyotes again?
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah,
so where are we looking
had
at?
some concerns. Right over here was where the report that somebody was concerned about in this area.
Okay, and we've had reports of coyotes in that area before, correct?
We have. We've had some normal reports.
We find and see if it's one we already know about or maybe something new.
Then we can explain, here's what's going on and what we know.
All right, sounds great.
The city park borders directly onto residential streets and is a popular local recreation area. The people here are not used to encountering wild animals. And when they do, they often confuse the much smaller coyotes for wolves, which traditionally don't have a good reputation. But so far, there's been no serious incident in the Cleveland suburbs. Nevertheless, the park rangers and wildlife wardens follow up every report. As in the national park, they've set up camera traps in many of the city's parks, so they can keep an eye on wildlife wandering the city. Here, there are white-tailed deer, raccoons, and coyotes. On the latest footage, an old acquaintance turns up.
What was that one? It's real light color, which, yeah, it looks like maybe there's a collar on that.
The collar of this coyote was fitted some time ago by John to find out the size of its home range and those of its young. He can roughly localize the collar by radio signals.
So she's over there.
Okay.
I think she's moving though. That's why the signal's kind of going in and out. And initially it sounded like she was very close. So she may be moving off, or could be sitting on the ridge watching us, just waiting for us to get out of the way. So like, hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How you guys doing?
Good. And so these dots are all of the one coyote?
From radio location and many camera traps, he's learned that the coyotes cover a large territory in the city, including paths and streets used by people. But it's still rare for people to come across the animals.
That's what the trail monitoring is showing us. They're here, they're around us, they're common, and they're avoiding us. The
coyotes have adapted their behavior to the human presence. They know when joggers and walkers are likely to be using certain paths, and they avoid them. Most people only hear them from a distance. Actual encounters only really happen when people stray from the designated paths or let their dogs off the leash. Then John and Amanda sometimes get sent pictures of a coyote close up, snarling and barking, like this one.
That coyote was part of a pair that had pups, and they're good parents. So those animals are responding defensively to growl or follow or bark at somebody. The coyote wasn't going into people's territories and causing problems. It was people going into a coyote's territory.
More of a problem are encounters in people's gardens or backyards. That's when coyotes, attracted by animal food or trash, sometimes lose their reticence. From his research, John Sepek knows that coyotes regard the green areas in residential neighborhoods as part of their territory and cover great distances there. But usually they're shy animals. Whenever he's contacted by worried residents, he sets off to talk to the people about the animals and reassure them.
Hi, John. How are you? Good. How are you? Good. This is my daughter, Amelia. Hi. How are you?
Diane Ward and her family have often had visits from coyotes.
Do you want to see where?
Yes, okay. I think so.
So I have this video that I took.
Oh, okay.
But usually at night around 8:15, we hear them coming back together and doing their barking. Initially, we thought, oh my gosh, it's dog fighting. Yeah. But no, sure enough, we've come to learn it's the coyotes.
At first, she was worried for her children. In the meantime, she is canvassing her neighbors for more understanding.
If we are out here too long or we make additional noise, they run off. Yeah.
Well, that's good. That's typical behavior.
They are interesting to watch, and we always call the kids to the window to come and see.
Typically, I get follow-on reports that say, hey, I saw the coyote again, and no big deal. Or, I saw a coyote, it was great, I got a picture, you know, and if I can get them excited, they can connect with nature. We go from fearing and maybe not wanting to go outside to all of a sudden it's an interest, right? And that's great.
More and more people, not only in Detroit and Cleveland, are getting involved in helping nature's comeback at Lake Erie. They're trying to provide more natural habitat in the region for indigenous flora and fauna. At the eastern edge of the lake, its waters flow into the Niagara River near Buffalo. The river forms the border here between the US and Canada. For thousands of years, it was a one-way flow. The water from Lake Erie poured through the river and into the mighty Niagara Falls. One of the most stupendous waterfalls in the world, and the attraction for locals and tourists. For a long time, the 57-meter-deep chasm was an insuperable hurdle for ships which came upriver from the lower-lying Lake Ontario. In the early 19th century, local businessmen got together to build a canal which would bypass the Niagara Falls in a series of steps. Later, the Welland Canal, as it was known, was provincially owned, and in the 20th century repeatedly made deeper and wider. The canal was intended for transporting freight and goods, but uninvited guests also used its waters. Sea lampreys. These archaic, jawless vertebrates pierce the skin of their victims with their sharp, rasp-like teeth and drink their blood. Lake Erie offered the sea lampreys plenty of prey. In particular, the main indigenous predator fish, the North American lake trout, fell victim to the lamprey's thirst for blood. Trout stocks were already suffering from pollution and overfishing in Lake Erie. The sea lampreys finished them off. The lampreys spread throughout the lake, and by 1960 had eradicated the lake trout. In Dunkirk, New York State biologists want to reverse that.
Wait, 5.59?
They've been trying for years to reintroduce the lake trout.
Wounds?
Jim Markham examines lake trout on which sea lampreys have left their mark.
This would be an A4 wound or a healed wound. Now things have moved forward enough where we can look back and realize the mistakes that we've had, but it's too late, and it's very hard trying to correct them, which is what we're trying to do.
The biologists breed over 200,000 lake trout a year and release them as yearlings into Lake Erie. There are various breeding lines coming from different lakes. The question is, which line is best able to cope with the lamprey attacks? The researchers check the stocks in the lake every autumn. They know where to look for the fish. The released trout frequent the areas of the lake where the fishermen used to make the best catches. The state researchers record how many lake trout are netted and how old they are. They discover that no less than around 80,000 trout are again living in Lake Erie, thanks to their efforts of reintroducing the fish. The biologists immediately recognize the farmed fish because they have removed a small dorsal fin in the breeding station. They're hoping to find fish with dorsal fins because these would have hatched in the lake itself.
Hey, Jim. Hey, guys. I just put them down right there.
Jim Markham wants to find out which lines have managed best to resist the attacks of the lampreys. To this end, all the farmed fish have a tiny coded pin in their nose.
Has a tag in it, Rich? Okay.
These are removed for closer examination in the laboratory.
Put the on it.
The tissue is dissolved so the pin can be inspected under the microscope. It's hardly visible to the naked eye, but magnification reveals a number identifying the year and the breeding line the trout has come from. By now, the biologists have a good idea which lines survive the best. But there's still a mystery. What has prevented the fish so far from breeding in the lake?
That's our big research project that we're working on right now, trying to figure out where those fish are spawning and figure out why are they not having success, and then be able to figure out, do we have the ability to change that?
The researchers suspect that the ecological state of the lake is still creating problems for the fish. One problem can even be seen from outer space in some years, as a green swirl. If conditions in summer are unfavorable, a carpet of blue-green algae spreads out, especially in the western part of the lake. In some years, the explosive growth of this toxic algae even threatens the region's drinking water. The main cause is the fertilizer that for decades farmers have been spreading in abundance on the fields. When it rains, the fertilizer is washed into rivers and ends up in the lake, where it promotes algae growth. On the northern side of Lake Erie, in the Canadian province of Ontario, is a farm which operates very differently in a bid to protect the lake. Blake Vince is a fifth-generation farmer and one of the few who are abandoning the path of fertilizer-intensive agriculture.
I think farmers are somewhat defensive to accept our role in the problem with the ongoing algae blooms in Lake Erie. First and foremost, a lot of us don't have the opportunity to live on the shore of the lake. We don't look at the water on a daily basis. So when we're removed from seeing the visual evidence, immediately the first reaction is to be defensive. But to be naive to think that we're not part of the problem, potentially, I think is kind of short-sighted as well. I think it's up to all of us to be invested in making sure that the water quality is the best it possibly can be.
At first sight, Blake's land looks no different from his neighbours. He too plants the crops that dominate agriculture here: soybeans, wheat and maize. But the field has not been tidied up like those of his neighbours. Plant remains cover the ground, and fine roots spread throughout the soil. Blake's philosophy is not to leave the soil bare at any time of the year. As soon as the maize or wheat is harvested, an intermediate catch crop is sown, without ploughing the land. Blake has neither ploughed nor harrowed his fields for 30 years. Now, in early October, he sows winter wheat, also without breaking up the soil. The advantage is that the soil doesn't erode as much, and all year round, the plant roots help to hold nutrients and water in the soil.
I can reduce those hard costs, like the fertilizer expenses, like the diesel fuel expense, like the machinery expense, by adopting this methodology. The direct spin-off has been an increase in water quality that leaves our farm.
But Blake's neighbours are still skeptical. As on the American side of the lake, the farmers in Canada tend to be conservative, especially when their land is involved. News of Blake's methods, though, is attracting farmers from all over the world to come here and learn from him.
So here we have all this residue on the floor from the previous crop, and you dig down into that soil, okay, and it's been really dry here, right?
He's happy to explain the benefits for the soil fauna. His fields are aerated by earthworms.
A lot of farmers complain and say, well, this system's going to use a lot of water. See that there was an earthworm right there, this big hole?
Nature also helps him to fertilize his fields. As catch crops, he sows legumes, plants which take in fertilizing nitrogen from the air.
that plant fixes its own nitrogen. So as a farmer, I don't have to spend as much money on fertilizer. And that's a direct cost savings for me as the farmer.
Yeah.
And then also that helps the water because it doesn't, when the water leaves here, the water quality is a lot better.
Okay.
Right? Because I don't have the risk of it running off and into the ditch and then the river and then ultimately the lake.
In a bid to convince the farmers of the area, Blake is now working with the local water authority on a scientific study. The first results confirm his own experience. Nevertheless, only a few farmers have followed Blake's example so far, which means a lot of fertilizer still ends up in the rivers. Nature itself could help solve the problem. The rivers flowing into Lake Erie used to have extensive, widely branched estuaries. Wetlands that filtered the water before it reached the lake, like the Great Black Swamp on the southwest shore. An environmental organization is campaigning to restore the lost wetlands here. Matt Kovac is working on the edge of the small Toussaint River to re-water a drained river meadow. It's a huge task. Only a tiny fraction of the original swamp remains.
Our goal is to restore about 55,000 acres, which is about 1% of the Great Black Swamp. If we put wetlands in the right places so they can function as nature's kidneys to filter that water before it hits the lake, that can really have a huge impact on slowing the water down, allowing that sediment load, which is carrying nutrients, to fall out and to settle out, and allowing those plants to uptake those nutrients so that the water coming out of these wetlands is clearer than what's flowing into them.
But simply flooding areas isn't enough. Intact ecosystems are a complex interaction of plants, animals, water levels, inflows and outflows. Research into the few remaining wetlands is giving conservationists important clues as to how they can be restored. These are researchers from the Toledo Zoo, who Matt is working with. They want to find out the conditions under which the indigenous turtles thrive.
No blandings or?
No, we'll check the others.
Got one.
Yeah.
That's one blanding.
Together they catch the animals in hoop traps and examine them. There's a whole range of turtle species around Lake Erie, some of which are endangered. The painted turtle is one species that's still comparatively common.
Okay. Let them right back over, and then the rest of these will work up.
Stocks of the American Blandings turtle, in contrast, have been heavily depleted.
All right. So going.
The turtles are measured and weighed by the biologists.
1325.
Afterwards, they engrave a coded mark into the shell. It doesn't hurt the animal, and it allows the researchers to identify the turtles should they get caught in the net again. So, animal by animal, the researchers record how the habitat is developing.
We're putting a puzzle together, and we don't know how many pieces there are, and we don't know what those pieces look like. You know, so we're learning that as we go. We're putting pieces together, and it's starting to fit together, and you're starting to see what it could be.
In a neighboring area, where the swamp has been able to recover for years, the picture is a lot clearer. Matt is fascinated by the great number of plants and animals that are coming back. He also brings his family here in his time off to experience nature. He wants to convey to his son in particular the beauty and fascination of wildlife.
Jack, look, muskrats were eating this. Look, you see all the cattails that are chewed up right there? That's from muskrats. Right over here. Right there, see it?
When Matt spots rare birds here, he knows there's a real chance for the flora and fauna around Lake Erie, because more and more people recognize the priceless value of nature and are willing to fight for it.
The next generation, I hope they have more of an appreciation of the natural resources we have. And I hope the next generations have a sense of pride in it that my generation and generations before that really haven't had for a really long time. You know, that's something where we have to do the hard work to right the wrongs of the past